Good evening, it's Friday the 7th of February and here's what's making news around the world on World News Tonight. Immigration crackdown, US deports in India, migrants in first such flight under Trump's order days before Modi's Washington visit. Defense support, first French-made fighter jets arrive in Ukraine but exact number remains undisclosed. Wildlife conservation, Thailand to administer birth control to wild elephants amid rising human-elephant conflict.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Akhil Qureshi.
Welcome back once again to World News Tonight. Let's begin in our neighbouring country in India. As we start this bulletin on tonight, the US military plane carrying 104 deported Indian migrants arriving in India, the first such flight to the country as part of the crackdown ordered by the Trump administration. The Indians who returned home had illegally entered the United States over the years and came from various Indian states. The move came ahead of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington, which is expected next week.
A US military plane carrying 104 deported Indian migrants has landed in Amritsar, India. This marks the first batch of deportations under President Donald Trump's intensified immigration crackdowns. The flight comes just days before Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington, highlighting the complex dynamics between the two nations despite their strong diplomatic ties. According to officials, most of those deported were from the Indian states of Punjab, Haryana and Gujarat. Despite the high-profile nature of the deportations, New Delhi has expressed no objections, citing concerns over undocumented migrations and its link to organized crime. India's foreign ministry has reiterated that the country is willing to accept verified nationals living illegally abroad, including in the United States. The deportations come as Trump's continue to push for mass removals of undocumented migrants, fulfilling one of his key campaign promises. As Modi prepares for his upcoming visit to Washington, the handling of immigration policies could become a key topic in bilateral discussions.
Now we return to the humanitarian crisis unfolding along the Thai-Myanmar border, where Trump's executive order freezing US aid funding for 90 days is having an immediate impact on refugees' displacement from Myanmar. The region is home to around 100,000 refugees, with 69% of camp funding coming from the US government.
A group of Thai medics battled to save the life of elderly Myanmar refugee Adabi as her daughter looked on tearfully. Previously, the US-funded International Rescue Committee would have treated her and the tens of thousands of other refugees living in camps on the Thai-Myanmar border. But President Donald Trump's freeze on most foreign aid has forced seriously ill patients like Adabi to rely on Thailand's state-run facilities instead. Tawachai Yingtoi Sak is the director of the Ta Song Yang Hospital, where Adabi was revived. He added that her camp had one IRC-run hospital and 2 clinics to care for about 29,000 people before support was withdrawn. Another patient from the same camp said they don't have money to buy medicine there and they'll all die without it. The refugee crisis on the border with Thailand has intensified due to escalations in the Myanmar civil war over the last 2 years. The loss of foreign aid has left Thai officials and refugee groups scrambling to fill the gap. Last week, the government vowed to support refugee healthcare following the US's aid suspension. But this district's leader said that beyond immediate response, state hospitals may not be able to deal with this long-term burden.
US President Donald Trump meets Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba for the first time as two allies vary of China's rise in work to boost businesses and security ties while an escalating trade war threatens to rupture and global economy. Trump, whose first 3 weeks in office have shredded norms and shaken foreign capitals from Ottawa to Bogota, has taken a more conventional approach to Washington's long-standing Asia-Pacific allies.
Ishiba's visit comes amid tensions over US Steel's $15 billion sale to Japan's Nippon Steel, which President Biden moved to block, sparking accusations of political interference. During the meeting, Ishiba sought to ease Trump's long-standing concerns about Japan's trade surplus by pledging to increased imports of US liquefied natural gas and emphasizing Japan's status as the largest foreign investor in the US. Meanwhile, questions remain about whether Ishiba can build the same personal rapport with Trump that his predecessor, Shinzo Abe, cultivated through Gulf diplomacy and trade negotiations. At stake for Japan is more than just trade. It's the future of its security alliance with the US, as fears grow that Washington's commitment to Asia could weaken under Trump's America First policies.
President Donald Trump has slapped sanctions on the International Criminal Court, accusing the body of abusing Israel and the United States. The US leader signed an executive order that placed financial and visa restrictions on ICC staff and anyone assisting ICC investigations against the US, its allies. The order included both financial sanctions and visa restrictions against unspecified ICC officials and their family members found to have assisted in investigations of US citizens or allies. Last November, the ICC sparked bipartisan backlash in Washington by issuing arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and several Hamas leaders simultaneously. The Trump administration ordered claims this created a shameful moral equivalency. The court said there was a reason to believe that Netanyahu and Gallant used starvation as a method of warfare by restricting humanitarian aid and intentionally targeting civilians in Israel's campaign in Gaza. Charges Israel officials dismissed as false and anti-Semitic. Demonstrators gathered in cities across the U.S. to protest the Trump administration early actions, decrying everything from the president's immigration crackdown to his rollback of transgender rights and the proposal of forcibly transferring Palestinians from the Gaza Strip.
Freezing temperatures in Minnesota to sunny Texas and the bustling streets of New York City. Thousands across the United States are demonstrating their discontent against the early actions of President Donald Trump's administration. In a movement called 50 Protests in 50 states, protesters are decrying the flurry of executive orders recently signed by Trump. From the immigration crackdown and climate change denial to the rollback of transgender rights and criticism of billionaire Elon Musk's role in politics. The nationwide demonstrations come after days of widespread rallies and street marches across the country. Over in Washington, D.C., massive protests also erupted outside the U.S. Capitol, where demonstrators, both civilians and Democratic lawmakers, showed support for the U.S. foreign aid agency USAID, which Trump and Musk recently moved to dismantle. Democrats, government agencies and outside groups have pledged to fight back against Trump's executive orders, including lawsuits having been filed challenging Trump's plan to block automatic birthright citizenship.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Well, frigid winds and heavy rains have collapsed the tents in Gaza, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless despite 2-week-old ceasefire. With shelters in short supply and winter conditions worsening, authorities are urgently calling for temporary housing assistance to prevent further suffering.
For Palestinians who've returned to Jabalia in the northern Gaza Strip, the day often begins here, lining up as a truck distributes water, which must then be carried to wherever they've found shelter. Al-Kurdi recalls a time when a United Nations relief agency provided plentiful water. But that was before Israel's devastating bombardment triggered by the October 7, 2023 attack by Palestinian gunmen on Israeli communities. Saad ad-Dabur is an engineer with the Jabalia municipality. He said the city once met its needs with abundant well water. Almost the entire population of Gaza was displaced by the fighting. A truce between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas has permitted thousands to return to what had been their homes. But the infrastructure that once sustained them is depleted or gone. Al-Kurdi said there's not enough water even to bathe the children as needed. An update from the UN Humanitarian Office in January showed that less than a quarter of the pre-war water supplies are available to Palestinians.
Now for an update on the ongoing situation in Ukraine. The French government announced that the first French-made fighter jet donated to Kyiv reached Ukraine today. It's unclear how many warplanes are being given to the Ukraine armed forces, as French officials have refused to disclose a number.
Ukraine announced on Thursday the arrival of its first batch of French Mirage 2000 fighter jets, alongside US-made F-16 fighters from the Netherlands. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov confirmed that the aircraft will commence combat missions soon. The exact number of jets delivered has not been disclosed for security reasons. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed gratitude to France and the Netherlands for their support in strengthening Kyiv's air force. The Netherlands has committed to providing F-16 fighters and training for Ukrainian pilots, and France has adopted the Mirage 2000 for air-to-ground strikes.
Hundreds of wounded people have poured into overcrowded hospitals in Goma, a major city in eastern Congo, as fighters rages into between government forces and Rwanda-backed rebels who seize a city of around 2 million people.
Walking through the halls of a hospital in Democratic Republic of Congo's Goma, Dr. Jules Cafetier points out the damage from the conflict between M23 rebels and Congolese forces. Cafetier is the director of the Charité Maintenant Hospital. He says shells or bombs fell on the roof of the neonatal unit, damaging the roof and solar panels. Another room suffered roof damage as well. He says bullets or shrapnels destroyed the walls there. If someone had been there, they would have died, he said. The United Nations estimates at least 2,800 people have died in recent fighting around Goma. Congo accuses Rwanda of using M23 to pillage valuable mineral deposits. Rwanda says it is acting in self-defense and to protect the ethnic Tutsis. On Wednesday, the Rwandan-backed rebels took control of another town in eastern Congo, despite the unilateral ceasefire they declared earlier this week. The advance could indicate M23 has renewed a push towards Bukavu.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Scientists from Cyprus have recruited children to recycle used cooking oils into biofuel as part of an internationally acclaimed initiative. The Frying Pan Initiative visits schools from a caravan, and it performs experiments and encourages the children to bring used cooking oil to school.
In Cyprus, the Frying Pan movement is turning household waste into a sustainability lesson. The initiative enlists children to collect used cooking oil from their homes, which is then filtered and turned into biofuel. Led by scientists at the Acti Project and Research Centre, a local environmental NGO, the project aims to teach children that waste can be repurposed. The profits are divided among participating schools, and children have the chance to decide which green projects to support. Meanwhile, the collected oil is processed at the Kazoil Waste Management Plant, where it is filtered and sold to international markets as biofuel. With millions of litres of used cooking oil thrown away each year, clogging drains and polluting underground water, the project offers a simple yet impactful alternative. Backed by Cyprus's Ministry of Education and recognised by the European Commission, it has now become a core part of the national curriculum, engaging over 80,000 students annually.
Thailand will begin giving birth control to a small number of wild female elephants this year, as the country struggles with the growing problem of human-elephant conflict. Asian elephants have been classified as endangered since 1986.
Thailand is set to begin a controversial birth control program for wild elephants as the country struggles with the growing human-elephant conflict. Asian elephants have been classified as endangered since 1986, but conservation efforts have led to a population surge, with numbers growing at 8% per year. As forests shrink, elephants are increasingly wandering into human settlements, damaging farmland, homes, and even causing fatalities. To help manage the population, about 20 wild female elephants that have already had calves will receive a contraceptive injection lasting 7 years. Officials say a successful trial on domesticated elephants last year showed no negative effects, but some experts argue more research is needed. The program is a part of a broader effort that includes patrol teams, fencing, and safe zones, as well as compensation for farmers impacted by elephant encounters. Experts warn that human expansion into elephant habitats is fueling the conflict, and some believe land use changes could offer a long-term solution. With public hearings completed, Thailand's Department of National Parks expect to begin administering birth control by the end of the year in what could be a landmark effort to balance conservation and human safety.
Sotheby's is estimating that a violin made in 1714 could fetch from $12 million to $18 million. Well, the upper end of range could beat the previous record of $15.9 million set by another violin in 2011.
A historical piece is going up for auction, and its selling price could once again make history.
So this is a 1714 Stradivarius, and it was made during the golden period by Antonio Stradivari. So this is the peak of his output. This is the best violin of this era, and it is going to be sold at Sotheby's on February 7th.
It still sounds pretty good for a 300-year-old violin, but Sotheby's says its owners were all famed musicians who treated it with the utmost care.
Brahms wrote the violin concerto specifically for this violin, and it was debuted on this violin in the mid-1800s. This violin was owned by Joseph Joachim, arguably the most famous and most notable violinist of the 19th century. It was owned by him for more than 50 years, and then it was owned by a number of other important violinists, and then was gifted to the New England Conservatory, which is now going to sell it for student scholarships.
And a lot of students could get scholarships if the Stradivarius sells in its expected price range of $12 to $18 million. If it sells at $16 million or higher, it will break a record for the most expensive instrument ever sold.
Well, that's a wrap from all of us at World News Tonight. We'll meet you next Monday with more updates from around the world. But until then, do stay around because we've got Sunwin with our Naika standing by, of course, for Nightly Business Report. But until then, I'm Akwil Qureshi, and we'll be back again. But definitely stay tuned because we've got visuals of a new exhibition that is capturing the beauty of the Amazon rainforest. Thank you for watching. Good night.